have brought up my basic form 13 again, and I need my 2 skirt pieces, and I need to change the name. So file, save as. We might have saved all of these at the beginning and I just don't remember, because I have to switch computers. So get out your own if you have them. Okay, so I've got my skirt front and my skirt back. And they've been renamed. And I'm going to delete all of those icons. And now I'm going to piece to menu both of those. So the only ones I have are labeled with my name, and they're the originals. And as usual, I like to see them with their sides together, because those are the 2 pieces that are sewing together. When I draped these, I draped them in a tube around the dress form, and then I pinched in the darts from around the top. It's perfectly balanced. The front and back are parallel to each other. The side seams are parallel to each other. And this is one balanced dart on both sides of the side seam. And then your additional darts. So there's your skirt. You have the option of sewing in 2 darts for a skirt, or when you combine it with the bodice you can switch that, but I've pretty much already done that for you. And we're not going to be using the single dart this time, so I'm going to delete that, delete mine. And what I want to do is create a skirt with flare added, and we're going to do that by closing the darts. I mean, we could change it into a yoke or something, but I first want to go over side seam balance after you convert this to flare. And because I'm going to do that, I'm going to name this one, I'm going to do save as again. Skirt back 1, I'm just going to make it skirt back. And this will be front 1. Okay, so I'm going to send those to the menu too. And I'll bring down both of my 1s. Well, that one doesn't have... and save that piece. Okay. So I have my matching front and back skirt, and I'm going to convert the darts to flare. So it's not as flared as a circle skirt, but it will be the minimum amount of flare required to cover the body the same way it does now and still fit the same. So I'm going to go to Advanced Darts, manipulate, so I get rotate. The dart I'm rotating is this one. The rotation point, I'm just going to use the end of the dart. My hold line is the center front, and my opening point is going to be straight east of that line. And I'll say OK. And this I can leave up here. I'm going to bring it near the bottom edge, and then I'll just swap that out later. But that would be the minimum amount of front skirt once I fix this. And I'll just blend that with a slight curve and then swap. So modify, line, swap, choose that one. And I'm not sure this will delete because it's a dart. Delete line. No, it's not going to let me delete that. So just pretend it's not there. This is the minimum amount of skirt that it would take to cover the same body. If I want to add a little bit more flare to it, and the reason that's true is because you've got the dart coming up from the skirt, so it still fits the waist area like it did. It will fit identically the same down here as if it were a yoke, but it has extra fabric and extra flare. So that's the minimum. Usually when you're making a skirt like this, unless you want a small sweep, you can add more to the side at the bottom with this one. And we'll do that with them together in the next step. So I've finished my front. It's at the minimum. And this one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'll just rotate both darts out. Advanced, manipulate, select dart to rotate. Rotation point is the, nope. The dart to rotate, make sure you choose the end of the dart or very weird things happen. This time it's the center back, straight east of that dart point. No internal lines are moving. Say OK. And there it is. This time I can leave it up here. I mean, the dart has gone from the top to the bottom, but we don't sew this in as a dart. We just connect the hem and let it be flared. Same thing with this one. Hold line. New opening point. Say OK. And I'm just going to leave it. So you can see where the flare would have been. You could even sew a godet in there if you want to. And create 2-point curve. I'm going to see if I can get it all in one shot, and then just bump it down below that line. And modify line swap. And I'm going to swap this line for that one, and that one, and that one. Yeah, it wants you to know where the darts were. So it might have been more pleasant for your heads if I had left this one up here pointy, but I didn't. Okay, so that's your back, this is your front. They are no longer balanced. When they were in their original position like this, the center front and center back were parallel to each other and the side seams were identical. If I flip around this line so you can see that, when I line those up on the corner right there, The side seams sew together in theory perfectly. I can see a slight discrepancy, but I wasn't careful when I set it down. But they're the same, and the center, front, and back are parallel, and that's what makes it balanced. That's what makes the side seam hang straight. On this one, if I do the same thing, and I don't know what numbers those are, so I'm going to delete them. Delete piece. Those are my ones. So I'm going to save these the way that they are right now. Save. And watch what happens up here when I save them. Touch, touch, OK, yes to all, overwrite, overwrite again, and there they are up here. I wonder if I can, no, I can't just move them. Well, I brought them all down, but it changes what they look like in the menu too. Okay, so I've got my two pieces. I've converted the darts to flare, but because I need to keep them balanced, I'm going to show you how to balance them. So, modify piece flip. So I have both pieces here, and you see how when I line it up on the corner again, they're not the same? It's because the darting amount is different, and so they're going to flare differently, because even if the darting was identical, the back darts are longer than the front, so you always get this discrepancy. So in the book, it shows how to do this, your pattern making book, but I like to explain it a little bit differently. Do you see how the waistlines are not lined up? They're not supposed to be. Your front and your back are a little bit different, and they're a little bit different at the hem as well. So I'm going to zoom in, and instead of lining them up on the center, front, and back, which is intuitive but wrong, you want to line up the sections that actually sew together, and the side seams sew together. So I want to put those triangles exactly on top of each other at the waistline, because that's where you would start sewing. And I've got my center, front, and back parallel, and I want to keep that way. But this is going to cause the hem to shift slightly backward or forward. And depending on what fabric you're using, it will be more or less noticeable. So this is something that we learn how to do in beginning pattern making, but now we're going to learn how to do it on the computer. So I find the easiest way to find halfway between the two is to draw a line between the two corners down here. So create a 2-point line from one corner to the other corner and say OK. And then I want a little right angle line exactly in the middle of that. So I'm going to come down to the third one. I am in Create, Line, and I'm going to go to Perpendicular on Line. And when it says to choose the point of intersection, I'm going to right click and say midpoint. So I'm going to choose the midpoint and pull that out. I happened to be on, well, I'll show you again. Create line. Over here where it says whole or half, if I had switched that to half, I could have had just the line on the one side. But because I had whole, it pulled it out halfway on both sides of the line. And that's okay with me. So I now have a line there, and I want to move this line out to it and this line into it, because I want to cut off the big side and add the same amount to the small side. So this is where I'm aiming for both of them. So I'm going to copy one of the lines and rotate it around. So create line, copy, choose one of them, say OK. The piece that's getting it, I'm going to put it on the opposite piece. So I'm going to choose that one, say OK. There's the line, come back and say cancel, and now it's attached to this piece. So now I'm going to come up to modify line, rotate the line, right here under rotate line, and I'm going to touch the dotted line, and did it highlight? Yes, it's highlighted. And I'm going to end selection to continue. And then I'm going to choose the end point of the line to rotate around, and now it's moving. So I could have measured that and maybe been a little bit more accurate, but I'm just going to set it down. It's not a right angle, so I will have to deal with that later too, but I've set it down right here. So that line is now part of the outer edge piece, so I'm going to copy the line to the other piece. So create line, copy again. Now that I've got it in the right place, I'm going to touch down and highlight it, say OK, and I'm going to copy it to that piece and say OK, and there it is, cancel. So now I have two pieces with a middle line between the two. And they both have that same line on it. One of them is on the inside, one is on the outside, and if I swap it, then they'll be balanced. So when I talk about wanting your skirts to be balanced, that's what I mean. And the side seams each need to have the same amount of flare on them. So modify, line, swap, dotted line, solid line, dotted line, solid line. And now we can delete those extra lines, and the piece is balanced. So I'm going to save those. This is skirt back 1 and skirt front 1. I'm going to save them instead of as 1. I'm going to save them as minimum, and then I'm going to put them up at the top and keep going. So this is step 1. This is a skirt where you've converted all of your darting to flare in the minimum amount that will still cover the body without adding extra. And we'll switch to adding extra. But this is the minimum amount, so I'm going to say save as front minimum flare, and I'm just going to abbreviate to minimum, and this one the same thing. So that's example 1, and I'm just going to right click and say piece to menu, piece to menu. So if you were to cut these out or use them for your final project, this would have less flare, but it would require that much, and you would not sew these darts in. That's just where the fullness came and went, and I think it's weird, but it can't be deleted. And if I flip them over, modify, flip, now when I flip them over and line them up exactly on that corner right there, this area is not supposed to be identical. It's different based on the posture of the dress form. Usually you would think that the back would be larger, but in her case the back is smaller. She doesn't have enough of it behind. So depending on the shape of the person, this is going to change and this is going to change. But you want your side seam to match at the same time as your center front and back are parallel to each other, and then it will all hang with a nice balance. Okay, File, Create, Edit, Model, Add Pieces. Well, we need a skirt model. I'm going to call it Skirt Practice. Oh, and I forgot to put my name in front of it. Okay, so I'm going to touch those two. And I guess we'll have to bring the others back down. Okay, delete piece. So these two, the ones, did I fix those? Yeah. No, I didn't. So I don't really need to keep those because they haven't been fixed. So I'm going to bring these two back down, and they changed color because they updated with the software. So I'm going to save both of them. File, Save As, and this time I'm going to call it Max because I'm going to add the maximum amount of flare that you can before you start changing the shape. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. Okay, so we have our minimums up there. We're going to have our okay, so they're already balanced. We don't have to balance them again. Modify piece, flip. Already balanced. We don't have to start from scratch. So I could, but I won't. If I wanted to have more flare, I could pull this out here. Oh. And just randomly add that much flare. But if I did that, it isn't going to hang nice. It would all spiral and puddle right here on the side, and it wouldn't spread itself out evenly. So I will get around to showing you how to do that correctly. But in the meantime, we're going to add a little bit more flare out here to the side of these two before we go to that stage. So I'll show you what happens if I try to do this without splitting the line. If I come in and modify set rotate, I choose the target point on the one and then the rest of the line, and the target point well, they lined up on top exactly. That's good. but I need to flip it back over. And if I flip it over without splitting the line, up here this is what happens. Modify piece, flip around this line so that they share the common line. They overlap weird. And that's not what I want. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to choose one of the pieces just right up here in the corner, and I'm going to modify, split the line where it's still at a right angle right here. I mean, it may not be a perfect right angle now that we've rebalanced it, but I'm going to split it up there close to the top. And then I'm going to say the modify flip, and I'm going to choose that line, and it will flip so that it's touching at the top. But it's doing what I want it to do, because now if I pull a straight line out here exactly halfway between the two, that will be the maximum amount of flare I can have on this before I start slashing and spreading. So I'm going to create my 2-point line right there, and another 2-point line, right click in the water and say midpoint, choose the midpoint, and then say normal, and I'll bring that over so that it touches the corner. So now my maximum amount of flare that I can add before I slash and spread is this. So I'm going to swap both of those lines for that one, and this one doesn't have its own, so I'm going to copy that line onto this piece. Create line, copy this line up right there. Okay, this piece, okay, there it is, cancel. So now I can move them apart and swap that. Modify line, swap. This line for this line, and this line for this line. That's okay. Well, now we need a right angle down here at the bottom, so we're going to have to come back to that. And I didn't split it, but I'm going to line it back up and copy that line onto this piece. Modify, set, rotate, and cancel. So I need to copy that one onto the front because I forgot. Cancel. So ideally I want a line that's going to be a smooth curve, so I can copy that right angle one, or depending on what you're doing, you can just bridge it across between the two and blend it, and that actually looks a little better. Not a lot, but a little. So instead, I'm going to copy that line. I'll just give you more stress and trauma. I may not notice though if you don't do it, so follow your stress level and keep it low. Create line, copy. This cute little curved line. Okay, this piece. Okay, there it is. Cancel. Okay. So we're moving them apart, and I'm going to, that means I have to split my original line right here. Modify line, split. I'm teaching you all of the basic stuff, and I know that you want to move on to the fun things, and as soon as you get through all of this stuff, you're welcome to move on to all of the fun things. modify line swap. And you'll learn what you needed to be able to do the fun things, but you'll also have learned how to keep things balanced. Okay, there we are. So I'm going to delete all of that. Delete. Should I wait till I do the other one? Maybe. No, that one. Okay. And splitting. Modify line split. Splitting on the computer takes the place of using your curve and blending and ending. And once you get together a group of basic patterns already, that's not the one I want. It'll be easier for you to just play mix and match than have to start from scratch all the time, but it works better if you know where things came from and how to do them. Okay, so delete line. Okay, so we now have the maximum amount of flare on both pieces. So essentially this line comes straight out, but we found out how far it could come straight out. If you take it from a balanced skirt and add the same thing to both sides so that it comes out as a right angle from there roughly, it might not be exactly a right angle, but it's where you would take the two pieces. If I were doing this out of paper, what I would do is line them up on the end like this and find that straight line right there halfway between the two, and then I would fold it on the line so that, and this will be just the same as folding. Modify flip around this line, say okay. Oh, well that's the opposite of what I meant to do. But I would fold the paper right there until I had these two parallel, and then I would have that line. So I would just put them both on a big sheet of paper so that this corner was touching and this was parallel, and I'd fold it, and then I would know that that is balanced. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the original line. This is how much extra flare we were able to add beyond the minimum. But to add more than that, we're going to have to slash and spread through the skirt. So delete the line. And if I bring down, not that one. You can see the difference between the two, but they're balanced. And the idea is to keep them balanced once you've got them balanced. Okay, so piece to menu, piece to menu. So my two max pieces I'm going to save so that they're updated. Say OK, overwrite, overwrite. And then I'm going to add them to my model file, add pieces to my skirt practice and say OK. and I already have 2 in there, so I'm going to cancel that one and cancel that one. Now I have 4. Awesome. So I'm going to send those 2 back to the menu, and I'm going to start from this stage where I've already added as much as I can, and now I want to add more. So I'm going to delete these 2 pieces, and remember that just returns them to the menu. So I'm going to slash and spread them, and I'm going to do that in Advanced Fullness, Tapered. I could also do variable, but I'll start with Tapered. Slash line from pivot end to open end. So the open end is going to be at the bottom, the pivot end is going to be at the top, and I'm just going to choose 2 places to add additional flare. I'm going to just start that over. So if I divide the line into 3, you could come in and carefully divide it at both ends. Oh, before I do this, I need to make sure that my lines are all merged. Modify line, combine. Okay. All right. And I'm going to save them both again just because. Okay. So I could carefully divide it into 3 sections, both at the top and the bottom, or I could eyeball it. And if I wanted to divide it into 3 sections, I would come up to create multiple points on a line, and you know how to do that. So if you want to do that, you can. I'm going to eyeball it. So Advanced, Tapered, divide it mentally into thirds, so you're going to draw 2 lines, and mentally into thirds down here as well. And then say OK. The location to remain stationary is always the center, front, or back, unless you want to have to fix the grain. I'm not moving any internal lines, so I'm just going to say OK. And I can do this at random, but I would rather do it by value, and I'm going to add 3 inches to each section. And then it automatically puts me to the next one where I can enter 3. And oh, seriously, I accidentally went into pleats. Did you follow me into pleats? It looks very much the same. Don't play in the pleat section. Tapered. And again with the lines. Pivot end to open end. OK. Location remains stationary. OK. Distance is 3 and 3 again. So that's the amount that I added. And do you see how the shape of that curve changed a lot? The shape of the curve changing actually puts the flare right here and right here where it belongs, and you've already got some out here. So instead of, I'm going to say OK and get out of that, this one, if I had tried to use this one and add that much flare out to the side, my waistline would have stayed the same shape. So this amount right here, if I had done it that way, would all just puddle around right there on the side seam where it is. It wouldn't be evenly distributed across the front. It would be oddly in a little spiral down the side seam. And if you're going to do something weird, that's a fine choice, I guess, but usually when I look at it, I think somebody made a mistake. So that's why you have to slash and spread. It also changes the shape of the curve of both the waist and the hem, and it puts exactly where you put your lines. Okay, so the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. Advanced, Fullness, Tapered, mentally into thirds. And if eyeballing it comes back to bite me, it will be because I have to balance it a little bit. Okay, location remains stationary, center, okay. Distance for new position, 3 again, and 3, okay. So let's see how close they are. I would say that is just fine. So they're already balanced because we've been keeping them balanced. And if you're not careful about keeping them balanced, you can make a mess that you have to clean up. Okay, that one was max before. Now I'm going to rename, I'm going to save these as File, Save as, it would be Additional Fullness, add fullness at the hem. Additional fullness at the hem. Okay. So I'm going to add that to my model. Add pieces, choose the skirt practice, say OK, touch, touch, and OK. And OK again. All right. Now, I don't know whether we have separate lines there or not. Modify, combine. Nope, it's all one line. Can I delete that yet? Nope. Someday they'll fix that. Alright, right click, piece to menu, piece to menu. So these are all part of our skirt practice. We've done multiple different skirts. The most difficult one to do, well, the first two, and after that it just becomes easy. And if you make yourself a basic group, then you never have to fix it again. But it is important to know how. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my maximum amount, that pair, and this time I want to add additional flare so I have gathers at the top. On this one I didn't have gathers. This time I'm going to do added fullness at the hem plus gathers. So, and I'm happier when I flip that. You don't have to, but I'm going to flip it around that line. So what I'm doing right now applies to paper patterns too, this whole section. You would just take your basic skirt pattern and move the darts to flare and then just balance the side seam and keep going. So I'm going to be adding gathers. Advanced. This time I'm going to choose variable. So I'm in fullness, advanced, fullness, variable. Slash lines from pivot end to open end. I'm going to divide it mentally into fourths and draw 3 lines this time. So from here to here. location remain stationary is the center again. And now it wants to know how much I'm adding for gather. So around my total skirt, if I want 6 inches around all 4 sections, that's just too hard. Let's add 8 inches. And, oh no, it's, okay. I want the math to be simple. We're going to add an inch at the top, so we'll be adding 3 to this, 3 to that. That's 6. That's an additional 12 inches. That's good. We're just going to add 1. So I'm going to add 1 at the top. At the bottom, I'm going to add 3. At the top again, I'm going to add 1. Say OK. At the bottom, where the arrows are, I'm going to add 3. It's back at the top again. I'm going to add 1. And at the bottom, I'm going to add 3. And say OK. So I now have made a skirt that's balanced, that has flare at the bottom, flare at the top. So I have 12 inches of extra gather in my skirt. So I'm going to do the same thing again, mentally divide it into fourths. You are welcome to do the little buttonhole placement thing that we did and make them perfect. Okay, location to remain stationary. Okay, distance at the top is 1. Distance at the hem is 3. Distance at the top is 1. And I know that because I'm looking for the yellow arrows and I've found them right there. Distance at the bottom is 3. Say OK. And if this isn't working for you, make sure you're on value and not cursor. 1 and 3. And there it is. How close did we get that one? Amazing how that works. Start with the balanced one, add the same amount in a similar place, and you keep it. Okay, so that one we're going to save as gathered flare. Okay, I've been writing flare, F-L-A-R-E, but every once in a while I wonder if I'm spelling it right. Okay, so add the pieces to the model, file, and I probably could have done that where that little screen popped up over here a minute ago. But it's not my habit because some of the computers are set up differently than each other. All right. And piece to menu. And piece to menu. And this whole section is your skirt assignment, and it's done. And we added them all to the model, so I can close it now, and you're through with skirts.